Okay, from political changes to leading change in business. That's what our last guest in this round of live stream interviews is going to be focused on. Hello to Zoe Chance, another keynote speaker who was on the main stage a little bit earlier, senior lecturer at Yale School of Management in the US. Thank you so much for joining us here. So very much flipping direction a little bit based from our last talk, but on stage, you were talking a lot about the power of individuals to influence change, and now in this next segment, we're going to be talking about changing common goals as a team, teamwork. There's a lot of people who visited this conference together with their team. We've heard a lot about how there is a need to have a good culture in your workforce. How can managers best lead change within teams, Zoe?
How can they what?
How can managers best lead change within their teams? There's a lot of leaders here.
Yes. The role of a manager is to influence other people, and the role of a leader is to empower others to be influential, the way that I see it. So a successful team leader and the leader of an engaged team is one who doesn't have to do a great deal on a day-to-day business basis for that team to be functioning. And if you don't know what it takes for your team to do that, if you're at the VIP session, you heard me teaching the magic question, and if you weren't, I'll just give you the quickie version. Ask, whenever you don't know, what would it take? The magic question, what would it take? This is the most influential question you can ask.
Thank you. What examples have you got that you could share for us from managers or companies you've observed where there was a resistant workforce and they managed to get on board with big change?
It's hard for leaders and managers, I know, especially right now, to be getting people on board with big changes because employees have seen changes that they didn't anticipate and didn't want over the past few years. And this is the time when the workforces that continue to be engaged, happy to come to work, are those who were being treated well and treated with respect before all of this craziness happened. So the time to start was yesterday. The time to be reaping the benefits of that work that you've been putting in already is today. And if you haven't been doing the investments, but I think you have because you're here, but now would be the time to start.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people here very open to change, and we've been talking a lot about how there is a need to be flexible and dynamic. Earlier on stage, you talked a lot about personal influence, and I wanted to ask, what is your favorite personal success story when it comes to influencing change, either in your work life or socially?
I don't know if this is my favorite ever, but my favorite one from the past few months was related to the invasion of Ukraine. And it was when this happened in February. I was really busy with a book launch. I had just published a book on February 1st, but I was just really, really upset, as many of you have been and still are. And what I decided to do was use the power of framing, which is one of the topics that I write about in the book. And I took a weekend, and my assistant and I reached out on Twitter to all of these journalists and all of these media organizations that were covering this situation and using frames like conflict or situation. And we reached out to them to say, thank you so much for covering this. We know that you care. We care too. But would you consider what it says to people when you use the frame of conflict? It sounds like something your parents might have. There's no good one, bad one. You could sit back and just watch it happen. And we asked them to please consider using the frame invasion or war to give the real attention that this deserved. And we had just over the course of a weekend, we had 30 different journalists and news outlets responding personally to us saying, thank you so much for that reframe, and we're going to write about it differently now. I'm not saying I'm the person who shifted, oh, thank you. I'm not saying I'm the person who shifted the frame, but there were many people like me, including journalists at Euromaidan Press in Ukraine, who were doing similar work. And this is the kind of power that you can have regardless of the structural power that you have in your organization.
And I think there has been much tougher language. I've observed that as a media consumer of different media globally. Let's talk about a bit more of the business context, the day-to-day. You've talked about the importance of saying no, which is something that I know a lot of us struggle to do. But so how do we fight back against people if they're trying to influence us, but we really don't want to do something?
As nice people, many of us have been trained to be indirect when we say no. And there are clear cultural differences here too, right? And cultural differences come into conflict when we have direct cultures working in global teams or doing global business with indirect cultures. And all of us who have that habit of being indirect need to be willing to be a little more direct than we have been. If, on the other hand, we're from a culture or just our personality background is to be hard driving and direct, and we've gotten feedback that it's a little bit too much, we need to start with more gentle and end with more direct. So all of us can be gentle to start, all of us can be direct afterward, but being as clear as, no, thank you for asking, absolutely no. And you can be warm while being direct. Those two things are not in conflict.
Yeah, we had some really interesting speakers talking about cross-cultural communication yesterday as well, actually, and even mapping where different members of your teams come from to try and help you get the nuance right. More generally, some of your research focuses on simple ways to help people lead richer, healthier, and happier lives. Now, here in the Nordics, there's always a lot of talk about how this is a place that tops surveys for well-being. Finland always does really well on the happiness index. Is that something that's visible to you as when you visit the Nordics, or is it anything you've reflected on during this stay?
Something that I've been reflecting on is how it seems to me like people here lead fuller, more human lives than some of the business leaders back in my country in the United States, where people are telling me or putting on social media, here's my regular job, I'm a CEO, but I also sing in a death metal band. Or here's my regular job, I run a marketing agency, but I also write books about sharks. I don't see so much of that with business leaders in the United States, and it makes me want to spend a lot more time here.
Yeah, definitely something I observed when moving here from the UK. People don't just go to the pub, they're doing ball dancing, or they're in sports teams or choirs. I think in the Nordics has a very high proportion of choirs. We've still got time for a couple more questions, by the way, for those of you at home or here. So please do use slido.com and then nbforum 2022 so we can try and squeeze a couple in. But Zoe, the theme of this event is future-focused leadership. And I know it's always really hard when we ask guests to just pick one thing. But if you could highlight one really important thing for leaders to focus on in the future, what would you say that should be?
I will just pick the simplest, most human thing, but empathy for other people who are in times of such great uncertainty. Uncertainty is one of the biggest causes of stress. And we're not going to be able to alleviate the uncertainty, but we can offer empathy during those uncertain times.
Yeah, I mean, particularly this winter with the cost of living crisis and people concerned about job security as we potentially move forward into a global recession. How would you say managers should be talking to employees about this turbulence?
We can be asking employees what it is that they need. They need all kinds of things that we can't predict. We can be asking employees how they feel motivated to be helping other people. And in these times of uncertainty, conflict, crisis, we do get motivated, humans get motivated to band together and to help out. And being helpers is one way that we can feel empowered.
Great. And one final quick answer, if you can. We heard a lot about psychological safety yesterday. Do you need to build that first before you can influence others, says this person writing into us?
It's an important question. If you have it, it's helpful. You don't have to build it first, but you can't violate it and still be influential. So you can't have people feeling psychologically unsafe and have them happy to be influenced by you, but you can be influential with people who don't know you yet, who are still open-minded, or it's neutral. Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, let's give it up for Zoe Chance. Thanks very much for joining us here on the HS Visio stage.